Unit 5 Review, Question 25. Connor water skied 1 3/4 of a mile without falling. Then he skied another 3/4 of a mile. And our question or goal is, how far did he water ski in total? So I started sketching this out below. So we're going to think of this as the miles that Connor water skied. So he started at 0. And he water skied for 1 3/4 mile, and then he fell. Then he skied another 3/4 of a mile. So from that 1 3/4, I added on 3/4, and this end point would be his total. Okay. So you may notice it's 2 2/4, which is 2 1/2. But now that we've seen the idea, we see we need to add. So let's do this by hand. 1 3/4 plus 3/4 will give us the total amount he water skied. Okay, I'm going to write the 1 3/4 mixed number as addition so we can combine. Okay. 3/4 plus 3/4 is 6/4. Since 6/4 is an improper fraction, we're going to change that to a mixed number so we can combine it with the 1. So 4 goes into 6 once, and then there's 2 left over. And I put that over the divisor. Okay. And now 1 plus 1 is 2, and we'll simplify the 2/4 to 1/2. So as a mixed number, he water skied 2 1/2 miles. Let's look at the next one. 26. Sarah lives 13/8 of a mile from work. She stops at a coffee house on the way that is 7/8 of a mile from her home. And here's our question. How far is the coffee house from work? So I started sketching this out. So here's Sarah's house, and we're told that she lives 13/8 of a mile from work. So here's work, 13/8 of a mile away. Okay. It says on the way. So that would be right on the line, we're assuming. She stops at the coffee house. That's 7/8 of a mile from her house. So from her home to her house is 7/8. And we're asked, how far is the coffee house from work? Well, if her coffee house is at 7/8 and work is at 13/8, we want the distance or the difference between these two numbers. And you can count it out. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And they're cut into eighths, so 6/8. Let's do this by hand. 13/8 minus the difference between 13/8 and 7/8. 13 minus 7 is 6. Keep the denominator, and we'll rewrite that as 3/4 of a mile. So the coffee house is 3/4 of a mile from work. Let's look at the next one. Question 27. Noah was 30 miles from home. He traveled 3/5 of this distance, the 30 miles, before stopping to pick up a friend. Now here comes the question. How many miles did he travel before picking up his friend? So I began to sketch this out below. So he started, and he needed to travel. So at the point of start, he had traveled 0 miles. And he needed to travel 30 miles to where his home was. Okay. And then they said he traveled 3/5 of this distance before stopping to pick up a friend. So we want 3/5 of 30. Okay. So I used these lines and I numbered this appropriately so that it would break into 5 equal pieces. So notice it's in 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, 4/5. So if we think of this as one whole trip, here's 3/5 of the trip, and it's at 18. Okay, so notice what that requires. We're taking the 30. Okay, I'm going to write this as multiplication. We divided it into 5 equal pieces. So I'm going to think of that as the denominator of the fraction. And then we wanted 1, 2, 3 copies, which means multiplying by 3/5. Okay, or 3/5 of 30 is multiplying 3/5 times 30. And this is another way we usually write it. Okay, so if you need to find a fraction of a number, you're multiplying that fraction by the number. Now I'll put this over 1, and we're going to simplify before we multiply. 5 and 30 have a common factor of 5. Divide by 5, 1. Divide by 5, 6. If we multiply across, 3 times 6 over 1 times 1 gives us 18. Okay. So he traveled to here, which is 18 miles, before picking up his friend. Let's look at the next one. Question 28. Lois is making headbands. She needs each headband to be 7/8 of a foot in length, and she is making 4 headbands. And our question is, how many feet of elastic does she need for all 4 headbands? So here, I started sketching this out on the number line. Okay, so this is how many feet she's going to need. So this represents, I guess, feet of elastic. Okay, so I started at 0, and I marked off 7/8. Okay, then I counted, so this would be 1 headband. We'll call it an HB. Okay, now to make 2, she'd need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 2 copies of 7/8. This would be her second headband. I counted 7/8 from here, and another 7/8 from here. Okay. So notice this is at 3 and 1, 2, 3, 4/8. Okay, and 3 and 4/8 is 3.5, but that's also 4 copies of 7/8, or multiplying 4 times 7/8. Okay. So to do this numerically, I'll put the 4 over 1. Let's cancel any common factors. 4 and 8 have a common factor of 4, so I'll divide them each by 4. And we have 1 times 7 over 1 times 2, or 7/2. And I'll rewrite that as a mixed number. 2 goes into 7 3 times, with 1 left over the divisor. So she needs 3.5 feet of elastic. Okay, let's look at the next one. Question 29. Callie is cutting a 5-foot tree for firewood. She wants each piece to be 5/6 of a foot long. And our question is, how many pieces can she cut of this length from the 5-foot tree? Okay, so I have a number line here. This is going to represent feet. Okay, and the tree is 5 feet long. Okay, so we want to know how many 5/6 are in 5. Okay, and this is a division statement. We're trying to see if I divide in 5 into pieces of size 5/6, how many pieces do I have? So let's just take a look at it and cut this as a metaphorical tree. It's 5 feet long. You'd cut here at 5/6 feet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This would be your second cut. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And let's just check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this last one is 5/6 also. So we would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces of length 5/6. Okay, so let's do this numerically. We want to divide 5 into pieces of size 5/6. Okay, we'll write this over 1. To divide fractions, keep the first number, change division to multiplication, and reciprocate. Okay. Before you multiply, cancel any common factors. So I'll divide 5 by 5 and 5 here by 5. And we get 6 over 1, or 6 pieces. Let's look at the next one. Question 30. Riley was 30 miles from home. He traveled 1/4 of this distance before stopping for gas. How many miles did he travel before stopping for gas? So this is really similar to a problem we saw where somebody stopped to pick up their friend, right? So here's the total distance he needed to travel, okay? And he traveled 1/4 of it before he had to stop for gas. So we need to break 30 into 4 equal pieces. Okay. So if I break it in half, that would be at 15. Now I'm going to break the halves in half. Okay. And notice they're not at marked spots. Okay. So this one would be halfway between 5 and 10, so I believe it's 7.5 miles. But you get the idea. We are basically finding, cutting into 4 pieces is the same as finding 1/4 of 30, which is 1/4 times 30. Okay. So we'll multiply, but first, see they have a common, actually I'm going to do something first. Let's multiply first because I want you to see something. 30 over 4. So notice we're cutting 30 into 4 equal pieces and seeing the size of one of those pieces, okay, which is equivalent to multiplying by 1/4. So multiplying by 1/4 is the same as dividing by 4. Since we didn't simplify before, we have to simplify here, but that's not too hard. Let's divide by 2. So this would be 15. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So 15 halves. And as a mixed number, that's 2 goes into 15 7 times with 1 left over the divisor. So he traveled 7.5 miles before stopping for gas.